Hello everyone and welcome to this video. My name is Arston and today we're going to talk about Python List Comprehensions. So if you're excited with that one, let's go ahead and let's start coding.
All right, so before we run any Python code, the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that we have Python installed in our local machine. So if you have been using Python in the past and you are sure that you have Python installed, you can skip this part. But for those who are not yet sure, what you can do is you can open your terminal. So if you are currently using a Windows machine, you can open your CMD or command prompt. And for Mac users, you can open your terminal or the ZSH. So for this one, I'm currently using Visual Studio Code. And in Visual Studio Code, we have an integrated terminal. You can open that by clicking right here and then choosing terminal. Or you can also use the keyboard shortcut, which is Control and backtick. And you can also use this button right here on the top, and it will allow you to be able to open the terminal. So in this one, what we want to do is we want to check for the Python version installed in your local machine. So in that case, you want to type here Python --version and then press enter. So if you have Python installed in your local machine, it would return to you the version number. In my end, that would be Python 3.11.9. And if you don't have Python installed, it might not return to you a version number. What you can do in that case is you can visit python.org/downloads website. So in this website, it would show you the current latest version of Python for your operating system. In my end, I'm using a Windows machine. At the time of recording, the current version is Python 3.12.4. So in the future, this might change, but don't worry. All of the codes that we're going to use for today would work in the future versions of Python. What you can do now is you can download the installer and then install Python in your local machine. And then you can go back to your terminal and type Python --version again. So let me clear this out. Once you are done checking the Python version, you can now create a folder inside of your local machine. In mine, I created that inside of desktop, and then I named that folder Python List Comprehensions, and then I open it in my Visual Studio Code. And also inside of that folder, I created a Python List Comprehensions.py file. This is our way to be able to create a Python file. We need to add the py extension. So today, we're going to talk about Python List Comprehensions. So list comprehensions is a way for us to be able to create a new list that is easy to read based on the values of an existing list. So this is kind of the syntax for us to be able to create a list comprehension in Python. But before we dive deeper into list comprehensions, the first thing that we're going to do is let's create a task. Let's say, for example, we're going to square numbers inside of a list. So let's say numbers equals, then we're going to create a list by using square brackets. And on this one, this would be numbers. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So if you want to square these numbers inside of the list, so the traditional way is we're going to create another list. So let's name this squared numbers. And then this would be a list 2. So for this one, we might use a for loop. Let's say for number in numbers. So what we are going to do is we're going to iterate over each of the numbers that we have inside of the numbers list. So in each number, what we're going to do is we're going to append that number to the squared numbers, but we need to first square it or we multiply it by itself. So let's say squared numbers, and for list we have that append method, and this one would get a number or an item that we want to append inside of the list. So what we want to append is number multiplied by itself, which is the number right here, or squared numbers. And if you save this, it will iterate over each of the items we have inside of the list, and then it will append it to the squared numbers. But before it appends it, it will square it first. So this is the traditional method by using the for loop. And if you try to print the squared numbers list. So this would be the output. We're going to call the squared numbers right here. So if you run this, you can see here that the output would be the squared numbers of each of our numbers inside of the numbers list. We have 1, 4, 9, 16, and 25. So we successfully created a new list from an existing list, and we squared each number by using a for loop. So what you can also do is you can also use a map function for this one. Let's say, for example, down at the bottom here, we can call the map function, and then the map function have this kind of syntax. So here we have map, then we have two parameters. The first parameter is the function, then the second parameter is the iterable right here. So let's pass first here the iterable. So we're going to add a comma. The iterable would be the numbers list. So we're going to pass the numbers list right here. Now for the first parameter, this would be a function. Now what you can do is you can use lambda to make this a little bit shorter. The syntax for lambda is lambda, then we're going to pass the parameters. So you can pass multiple parameters, but you only have one expression right here. Next is we're going to call the lambda right here. So lambda, then we're going to pass the parameters. The only parameter that we want here is the number. So in each iteration, we're going to get the item inside of the list. Then what we want to do in that item is we want to multiply it by itself, or we want to square that specific item. So here we used a lambda function for the first parameter of the map function right here, which is a function. Then what we're going to do is this line that we have here, this would return to us a map object. What we can do is we can convert it into a list right here. Then we can store this new list into a list. Let's call that squared numbers. Let's say squared numbers right here. So maybe we can add the version 2 to make it a little bit more simple. Then let's try to print the version 2. So squared numbers version 2 right here. This is using the map function. So if we try to run this one, as you can see, the output is still the same. But for this one, this would be using the map function. So maybe let's add here. This would be map. There you go. So on this one, this is more shorter, or we can also achieve this functionality by using only one line. However, on this one, as you can see, it is a little bit hard to read. So you need to know what lambda does or what map is. Then you need to know what list is, or why we are converting the map object into a list. So this is a little bit difficult for us to read if you don't have the information first. So what we can do here to make this a little bit simpler is we can use list comprehensions. So for list comprehensions, we have this kind of syntax right here. So this would allow us to be able to create a new list based on an existing list that is easy to read. So here, what we can do is we can say, let's use here the new list. So this would be called squared numbers version 3. It's like right here. And on this one, we're going to use list comprehensions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we will have, let's build first the for loop. So we have here on this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to iterate over each of the items inside of our numbers list. So we're going to say for number in numbers. Then what we want to do is we're going to have the expression. So here we have for item in iterable. The item is the number. Then the iterable is the numbers list. So we're going to pass the expression here. Now the expression allows us to be able to get the current item, and this would also be the outcome. So what you want to do is you want to manipulate the item first before you store it into the new list. So what we want to do is we want to multiply the item by itself. So number multiplied by itself. We want to square that specific number. So here we just achieved this code that we have here in one single line that is easy to read. So what we are basically saying is for each of the number inside of the numbers list, we want to get that number and multiply it by itself. So we achieve it in one single line that is really easy to read. So we would store that into a new list, which is the squared numbers version 3. So for this one, we can try to print out the output. So we use list comprehension in this one. Comprehensions. There you go. And then we're going to print the squared numbers version 3. Save this and let's try to run this again. So as you can see, this is using the for loop, this is using the map, and this is using the list comprehensions. So here we can see that using list comprehensions, we are able to create a new list based on the existing list. And in this one, our syntax is really easy to read. So that is our first example for list comprehensions. Now, what if we want to be able to filter out even numbers inside of the list? Let's try to remove this one right here. So let's say, for example, let's add more values to this one. Let's say 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. So inside of this numbers list, let's say we want to filter out even numbers. So when you are using a for loop, you might create a new list. So even numbers, this would be a new list. Then you're going to use the for loop. So for number in numbers, so you're going to iterate over each of the item inside the list. Then what you want to have here is a condition. So if the number, then you're going to use the modulus operator, modulo 2 is equal to 0. And then you're going to have a colon right here. So what you're basically saying is that if you divide the number by 2, if it returns a 0, so it doesn't have a remainder, then it is an even number. If it has a remainder here, that would be 1, it means that is an odd number. So we want to only get the even numbers. So once we get the even number, we're going to add it into the even numbers list. So we're going to call the even numbers list, and we have one method, which is the append. So we want to append that specific number if it is even. So if we try to print out the output, so print output, comma, and then we're going to print the even numbers list. If you run this, as you can see, the even numbers inside of the numbers list is 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 10. So this is by using a for loop. So we can also use here the filter function. So to create or to use the filter function, we have this specific syntax. We have filter. Then we're going to have here two parameters. The first one is the function, and then the iterable. So we're going to call the filter function first, and then here for the second argument, we're going to pass the numbers list. So numbers. Then for the first parameter, which is a function, we can use here a lambda function again. So lambda, then you will have the parameters. So let's add here again the syntax for lambda. Lambda, then going to pass the parameters. So you can have multiple parameters, but you can only have one expression. So the parameter that we're going to add is the number. And on each iteration, what we want to do is we want to get the number and use the modulo 2. And if it returns to you 0, then we want to add that number to our even numbers list that we're going to create. So filter is used to filter items from an iterable based on a function that returns true or false. So here, if it returns to you 0, so it means that the number is an even number. And then if it returns to you a 1, it means that the number is an odd number. There you go. So what we want to do is this would return to us a filter object, and we want to convert that object into a list. Then we want to store it inside of a new list. We call that even numbers, maybe version 2 again. It's like what we have right here. And then you can print this one. So this is by using the filter function that we have. So we're going to call the even numbers version 2. So if you run this, here we can see that this is by using the for loop, and this is by using the filter function. So we have the same answer. But just like what we have on map, you need to be able to know what the filter function do, what lambda is, and also what this line of code really means. It is hard to understand for beginners. So maybe we can have a much more simpler and easy to read code for this one. And for that one, we're going to use the list comprehension. So let me copy this syntax again, right here. So to be able to do this, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to call first. We're going to create a new list. So even numbers, this would be the version 3, equals, then we're going to pass square brackets. Now, first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the for loop. So for item in iterable. So for number in the numbers list that we have, what we want is we're going to create the condition. The condition will be if the number modulo 2 would be equal to 0, then we want to get that item. So we want to return it in our expression. So we're going to return the number right here. Then if we try to print this, so this would be by using list comprehensions. We're going to return the even number version 3. So if we run this, so we get the same result, 2, 4, 6, 8, and then 10. But as you can see right here, this line of code is easy to read. So we want to return the item for each item in the iterable if the item matches our criteria. Our criteria is, or our condition is, the number should be modulus 2 should be equal to 0 right here. So that is our condition. So that is by using the list comprehensions, we can get the same result as by using the filter function and using the for loop right here. And it is easy to read. Okay, so let's have another example. So for this one, we're going to create another list. So we're going to call this list song book. So this would be a list of dictionaries. And in Python, to create a dictionary, you're going to use curly braces. And inside of the curly braces, you're going to add key value pairs. So for this one, we're going to add 2 key value pairs, the title and the year of the song. So title, that is the first key. And the value for this one, this would be Living on a Jet Plane. This is one of the songs that I really like. So let's add another key. This would be the year. Then the value for this one would be 1969. Let's create another one. So let me just copy this one right here. Paste it. And I'm just going to change the title. So the title for the next song would be Can't Take My Eyes Off You. So this is released in the year 1967. Let's create another one. So let me change this one right here. This one would be Just the Two of Us. There you go. So this is released on the year 1980. Let's create another one. Let's name this Fly Me to the Moon. This is released in the year 1993. All right. So once that is done, maybe what we want to do is we want to be able to filter out this list that we have here. We only want the songs that are released from 1980 and above. So for that one, let's create another songs list here. This should be an empty list. Then we're going to loop over each of the song inside of our songbook list. So for song in songbook, then in each iteration, we're going to check if the year that the song is released is greater than or equal to 1980. So if song, we're going to access the key of year by using the square brackets and pass here year. Then we have a condition. Is the year greater than or equal to 1980? So if the song is greater than or equal to 1980, then what we want to do is we want to append that song into our songs list. So songs that append method. Then we're going to pass that specific song. So if you print this, so we can see here that we only get the song Just the Two of Us and also Fly Me to the Moon. They are released from 1980 above. So we are able to filter it out. We can also use here the filter function. If you're going to use the filter function, here, what you want to do is call the filter function. So filter, then we're going to pass the function as the first parameter and then an iterable as a second parameter. So for the first argument, we're going to pass here lambda, then our parameter, which is the song. So for each song, we want to check the year key if the year is greater than or equal to 1980. Then for the next argument, we're going to pass the song book list. There you go. Next is this would return a filter object, and we want to convert that filter object into a list. Then we want to store that list into a variable. So this would be songs version 2. This would be a new list. And if you try to print this out, so print, then this would be using the filter function. So songs version 2 right here. If we try to run this, we can see that we are able to get the same result. There you go. So on this one, just like what we talked about in filter, we need to be able to have a prior knowledge for us to be able to understand this line of code. But in this case, we are able to do the same thing here, but in one line of code only. That is the advantage of the filter function. So what if you want to use the list comprehension? So let me copy this syntax right here. So for this one, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pass a name of our new list. So let's call this list version 3. So for this one, we'll pass square brackets, and then we're going to pass here the for loop. So we're going to loop over each of the items inside our songbook list. So for song in songbook, then we're going to pass the condition. So if song, then we're going to access the year key. So year. So is the year greater than or equal to 1980? Then we want to return that specific song if it passes this condition right here. Next is we're going to print the songs version 3 list. So print. This would be using list comprehensions. songs version 3 right here. If you save this and run it again, you can see that we are able to achieve the same result. But if you compare it, this line of code is much simpler to read compared to by using the filter function. So this is the power of list comprehensions. And I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned a lot. So if you do, please give us a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to the One Code Camp YouTube channel, and see you on our next videos. Thank you very much everyone, and have a good day.